Welcome to Growing and Aging Sex Positive,
or GASP.
Get ready to grow with us as we discuss all things sex and sexuality related. I'm Nina.
And I'm Cari. This is our second episode about pornography. In our last episode, we talked about what it is and what it can be. And today we'll be talking about how it shows up in our culture.
And we want to hear from you, too. What's on your mind? What questions or thoughts do you have about sex and sexuality? If there's one thing we've learned, pornography raises a lot of questions. We will share questions and replies in a future episode. Write to us at gasppod@gmail.com. Cari always laughs when I say pee-pee.
I mean, you say pee-pee. Sometimes I say pee-pee.
So that's gasppod@gmail.com. GASPPOD@gmail.com.
Our major sponsor is Oak Park Our Whole Lives. Did you know that Oak Park Our Whole Lives classes uses a nationally recognized curriculum that's both secular and values-based while providing room for youth to do their own values exploration? For more information, check out their website at www.opowl.org.
Now let's get started. Hi, folks. So today we are talking about pornography in the cultural context.
Yes, we are.
We are going to just ask some of the questions about who is watching porn, how are they watching it, and hopefully get into some questions about what it does for and in relationships. Yeah, this has been really interesting to research this. I have been learning a lot this week. So in our last episode, we were really focused on the potential of what porn can be. Pornography almost in the abstract, how we might define it or not define it, what is included or not included. Do we include Instagram in our definition of pornography or not? How about medical text? And that is almost independent of how it actually shows up in the world, specifically the world around us. And so today we are looking more, but there is a ton of research on pornography, and we are just getting into some of the surface, the first level of that research. There is a lot of work around it. There are a lot of statistics here today, and so we need to start with a couple of notes about statistics and pornography. I know that this is one of your things, Cari.
It is, yes. I think I've said in previous episodes, I'm not a super clinical person. I respect the data, but I'm always a little suspicious. And anything about social sciences or human behavior, I'm even more suspicious. And then you add the layer of pornography, which is like one of the most taboo forms of media. And I just really want a disclaimer that the statistics are limited by how they were collected, the methods of the study, and the biases of the researchers and our cultural context. So that's my disclaimer. Having said that, I don't know how we would have this conversation without talking about the statistics, because
Right.
I think they're super important to ground us with some sort of like quantifiable information.
As limited, and I think that you are right that, say, asking people to self-report about pornography use is going to have some inherent challenges to it or some distortions in the numbers. But without that, we are just operating in the dark.
Yeah,
right?
and then we really are just operating on our like primal human bias, and I don't think that's great either. I respect the numbers and respect the work that's being done. I'm just always a little suspicious of it.
It's fair, and I think that's really important to keep in mind. Now, I do think social scientists are very aware of this, and they do a lot of work to build security into the study and so on. Or we'll be looking at some meta-analysis that takes a number of results from a number of different studies
By that, just to clarify, you mean probably the people that are self-reporting use of pornography is lower than the actual number of people that are consuming pornography?
That is what I mean.
Yeah, okay. I don't think anyone would be super surprised by that. That seems like...
Okay, first question to ask is, who is watching porn?
Who is watching porn, Nina?
Who is watching porn? I found this article from the Journal of Sexuality Research and Social Policy that does a kind of meta-analysis, pulls together data from a bunch of different studies. It's called Pornography Consumption in People of Different Age Groups, analysis based on gender contents and consequences. So this is right on track with what our questions are about. Something else that's nice about this study is that it looks at all age ranges, whereas a lot of pornography research seems to focus only on ages 18 to 34.
The world is perfect all the time. And everyone over 34 is asexual. I am being sarcastic, just for clarity.
Yep.
If you can't see my face.
Obviously, that is very self-limiting. So that's another reason why I liked this study in particular. Now, part of what we see in this, in other studies that we've found, is that there have been changes in the past decade. It used to be that pornography use or consumption did tend to drop off or taper off after around age 35 or so. What we are seeing in this study is that has changed in the last 10 years. There is a pretty steady level of consumption across age groups now. Over 85% of respondents are using porn.
So that 85% is interesting. That is well over that's well over median. That's 85%. We're well into majority.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now that is a very broad number, and we'll get into a little bit more specific variation in the numbers. Another thing about statistics, right? There's this quote from Benjamin Franklin. So there's this quote from Benjamin Franklin that I've always loved. He says something like, and I won't get it exactly right, but what a wonderful thing is man, because man has the capacity to reason. And what reason gives us is the ability to make or find an explanation for whatever conclusion we want to draw.
Ah,
Yes.
I love that. That's another reason I'm always suspicious of statistics. I'm like, I could frame these numbers. I could analyze this data any which way I wanted, and it could come out with a scary or confirming number at any point.
Beautiful thing about statistics, too. Also something to be keeping in mind. So gender. So participants in the studies are skewing male, maybe unsurprisingly. So that might skew the data, although there are ways to interpret the data to neutralize for that.
Interesting.
But it's something to acknowledge. And if we ask the specific question, have you ever viewed pornography in your life?
Yeah. So really broad question, right? Was it last year, last week, or 25 years ago one time by accident?
And that it doesn't matter how you came across it.
Yep.
It doesn't matter whether you went looking for it, whether you were doing it for educational purposes only, or you just went there for the articles or some other reason, or sexual pleasure. Just asking that basic question, 96% of men in North America have viewed pornography in their lives. And for women, that number is 61%.
And that's purely anecdotal. There's no scientific validity to that statement.
What you mean is you think 61% probably underrepresents
For sure.
the number of women who have actually viewed pornography. I think that's likely.
Yeah.
I could buy that. Have you ever viewed pornography in your life? Lifetime is a long time, and a lot of things can happen in a life, and maybe you found magazines under somebody's bed.
It just seems like a pretty big gap too between male, female, men, women, which, as we know, those categories are problematic in and of their own. That seems like a huge gap. 96 male, 61 female. I feel like that number for women is probably higher.
Yeah. And 96% is pretty high.
Yeah.
Not a lot of room to go up from there, but maybe there's it could still be an undercount.
It could, yeah.
Do you think that there's more stigma in women admitting to viewing pornography than men?
I definitely think so. I'm interested to hear your perspective. I guess I'll age myself. I'm 38 years old, and I think in my lifetime, because media has changed so much, I think the normalcy and ease of access of pornography has increased. And I think women are more willing to openly admit that they view and enjoy porn. But I still think it's really taboo for women. And then that's only my, peers that I'm thinking about. Because, I don't really talk with a lot of people outside of my peer group about their pornography consumption. Mm-hmm. There's a constant desexualization of anybody middle-aged and up anyways. So I don't have a good pulse on, quote, normal behavior is for them, because I feel like it's just so repressed socially.
Bunch of interesting things you said there. You are younger than I am, so we're just gonna
yeah, you don't have to disclose your age. I just felt like it was kind of relevant for the media. I remember a time when you had to get porn from a store, and then I remember the time when it became free on the internet, just to put myself firmly in that millennial cage. I was part of that generation that it went from stealing a VHS tape to being able to Google search big boobs. It's
right.
Wild to think about.
Yeah, no, I have no problem. I'm 10 years older than you. This is useful, right? Because we have different generational experiences, and the data does bear out that younger people are more open to pornography use and using the internet in that particular way than older people.
Yeah.
Although we also see that in I think it's the 40 to 59 demographic, and then 60 plus, the consumption has increased a huge amount in the last decade.
Yeah, and I have this anecdote about a different industry that made me shift my perspective on, I don't want to even say aging, because every year I get older, the number that I think is aging is a much higher number. So I don't want to categorize anyone over 65 is senior, because that's not how I feel about the world anymore. Anyways, the point of this story is that in my previous professional life, I was at a company talking about age ranges of people accessing a portal to book services. And there was a rhetoric that the frontline workers wouldn't offer this portal setup to anyone, quote, old.
Oh, because they can't touch computers.
Because they don't know how to use the internet, Nina. It breaks. But that actually the 65 to 75 age range was had the most uses per portal download. Because they had the most time to access services that way. And there was really interesting studies, and that was a shift. And again, not a direct application to pornography, but I just often feel we do a real disservice to anyone we've deemed as, quote, old. They don't know how to use computers and the internet, and that's not true anymore. That's not a reality. I know plenty of people that are senior, retired, whatever word we want to use, that have way more time to spend on an electronic device than I do.
It's a great point. And I think the sexual interests and appetites of folks 65 and up have been often discounted way more than it really reflects actual human interest.
Yeah, I'm totally inclined to agree with you there. I think there's just a complete desexualization of people who are not reproductive age. So in summary, old people are watching porn. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Everybody is watching porn.
So one study of heterosexual women, now this one was just between 18 and 29 years old, found that 83% of them had viewed pornography. So that bears out what you were saying a minute ago, that younger women in particular seem to be more comfortable or more interested in pornography. So maybe there's that generational difference there, which is really interesting in contrast to what we were saying before about romance novels and maybe text pornography or erotica, text erotica being more attractive to women or more in line with feminine types of pleasure or feminine sources of desire. We seem to be finding in this bit of data anyway that there are plenty of women, 83% of young adult women are viewing visual pornography.
I think that makes total sense to me.
To sum up, used by lots of people, all age ranges, particular increases in the last decade among folks who are 35 and over. It used to taper off, doesn't anymore, and more use in women than there used to be as well.
Yeah, and maybe you're about to get to this, but one thing I noticed when looking at the research that you pulled for this episode is that you have some notes about the ranges.
Oh, yes.
And this is wild to me, folks.
Overall, there are these averages, and this is, I think, because it's a meta-analysis of many different studies. The studies are asking slightly different questions. Yeah. But yes, it describes pornography use in men as being between 60 and 98%. So
like 2/3 to 100%.
That's really a useful set of numbers there. And then pornography use in women is between 30 and 90%. So even a bigger range. So almost meaningless.
This is what kind of makes me hone in on that, and why my neon warning sign goes off is that I'm not a statistician and I don't do any kind of research and have never done research professionally, nor academically, nor in any way, right? But when I see a range like 30 to 90% for women, I immediately say, wow, it seems like women are really impacted on how the question is phrased. Like you get a lot of variance depending on what you ask for women, and for men too, but 30 to 90% is a massive range, and I'm like, oh, I wonder why.
Yes, while I have a background in academia, it is not one in statistics specifically. So I want to be cautious with that. What I was able to see with those ranges is that they seem so wide as to render those numbers totally useless.
Yeah.
And what that is reflecting, I think, is that it's trying to summarize data from a number of different studies that are asking a bunch of slightly different questions.
Yeah.
But you make a really nice point that maybe women are more reactive or influenced by the specifics of the question. What are you using the pornography for? Mm-hmm. Have you viewed it in the last year versus in your lifetime?
Yeah, those could all really skew if you would answer yes or no to those questions.
Or maybe you're viewing it with a partner and you haven't searched it out on your own. So then the next kind of question we have is how much or what kind of pornography is being watched? Right?
Yeah.
Just where is it happening? What is happening with the porn?
What is happening with the porn?
What is going on here? Yeah.
This is my favorite. I'm endlessly amused and interested every year. I'll out myself that every year I look at the PornHub statistics because they make these really easily accessible infographics and stuff about search phrases. So I'm fascinated by this.
It says something, yeah. So Cari is referring to PornHub publishes a report every year on how it was used in the past year.
So exclusively PornHub, which is a for-profit company, just to be clear.
Right. So that's another kind of caution in considering the data that they provide us.
Yeah.
PornHub is one of the top 3 pornography sites in the world. So what is happening on PornHub is going to tell us a lot about pornography consumption. And it has hundreds of millions more views per month than Amazon or TikTok, right? So then other kind of quote unquote mainstream internet sites. So guess what? The internet really is for porn.
I had no idea.
The statistics bear this out, folks. Yeah, Pornhub is viewed millions, maybe billions more times per month than Netflix, Amazon.
I like that you have LinkedIn. That's my favorite one. It feels very like apples and oranges.
Yeah.
We're going to those websites for very different reasons. Maybe. To each their own. The Weather Channel cracks me up. Oh.
Yes, I don't know why they decided to compare these particular sites, but there it is.
People are far more interested in searching up pornography than the weather.
Maybe not surprising, the U.S. is the country that has the most trafficked pornography sites.
Yeah.
And because the U.S. is by far the largest of the countries that are listed here. There are more people in the U.S. Now, I was not able to kind of do the math to see which countries are the largest consumers of porn on a per person basis, and realized it was interesting that Pornhub doesn't.
That fascinates me because I love that's where your mind went with the data. Is it just one person that's just
more
driving up the porn use? Or is,
Oh, I just mean, what are the rates of use in
right.
the U.S. versus,
right.
I think the Philippines was the second highest
is it a small
porn.
Percentage of our population that's really skewing our numbers with their per capita views?
Oh, that would be interesting, yeah.
I do remember seeing some stuff during the COVID-19 pandemic about really like hyper specific like porn use region by hour of the day because people were really interested in sexual behavior during the pandemic.
There's a lot of data out there, and yes, a lot of special things happening in that lockdown year. And I just need to correct myself. So the U.S. is by far has the most traffic on Pornhub, but France is actually number 2, and then the Philippines.
Oh my goodness, France. Is that so? That's most traffic. It's like you said, it's not per capita. It's just most traffic overall.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right. Which, of course, that's what Pornhub is interested in because they don't actually care
if
about
it's the same guy or gal coming back 25 times or 25 different people is not.
They're making their money the same?
Yeah.
Regardless.
Interesting. I also see this super interesting note about time spent on porn sites.
Yes.
It just says time spent on porn sites is longer than time spent on other sites. And I assume that applies to the Netflix, Amazon, TikTok, Weather Channel, LinkedIn categories.
So when we're measuring how frequently people go to these particular sites and how much time they spend on there once they get there, there's something called the bounce rate. And the bounce rate is longer for the pornography sites than it is for these mainstream internet sites, which including Netflix, which you might think would skew a longer amount of time just because of the nature of what it is than, say, Amazon.
Yeah, I want to have deep thoughts to share about Netflix, but I need to circle back on the fact that it's called the bounce rate.
The bounce rate.
I love that for a porn site. We have a longer bounce rate.
We're doing more bounces.
I love that. I guess that, again, that tracks for me. So I'm comforted by this data that you found and synthesized for us because it feels like on track with what I feel and see in the world. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Good. Where Pornhub's report is really interesting and fun is in the trends that it reveals about how people are using pornography. What kind of porn are they interested in?
Yeah, let's get into it. I love this. I want to just say...
Is this your favorite?
This is my favorite. I know far more about this than I think I need to. It's a niche interest, and anything I say is not a value judgment or in any way kink shaming what people do and do not concern. Just a side note that I find things like these studies fascinating. Not a study, sorry, this data. super clear, Pornhub is for profit, because you don't ever get to poll people in the world. There's no way to have access to this information and know if like your experiences are like similar or on par with anyone else's until you see it on
what search terms are people clicking into their computers in the privacy of their own time.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating to me. But again, no kink shaming. If I giggle or I'm fascinated by it, it is in good nature and without even a hint of judgment. So
yes. Just delighted humanity here.
It's so delightful. And some of the categories are just, they're delightful. We'll get to some that make me giggle and I hope make other people giggle.
Great. The most popular overall search terms
in the world.
Yep.
Drum roll.
Number 1 is hentai. And now I had to look up what hentai is. Can you tell us what hentai is?
I like that Dinah's just gesturing at me. So I am not an expert in hentai, but I believe it's all animation, like anime pornography. And I believe it originated in Japan. I think that's why it's called hentai. But I'm sure there's artists. Are they artists? There are designers, creators all over the world who create hentai. But it's animated.
Yeah, that was news to me that animated pornography would be really big. And that seems really significant because that's going to be, the nature of it is going to be less exploitative, right? There'd be less concerns about who is involved in the creation and who is maybe making choices.
Yeah, I love that. I do just want to say, I never want to out myself with any personal viewing interests or habits, but just because it's animated, there is some seriously dark and disturbing animated adult content. I just want to float that out there. It's not exploitative to like live humans or performers on screen, but the content is not.
It doesn't say anything. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Those are different aspects of exploitation, and we'll get to. And so number 1 is hentai. Number 2 is MILF. So that stands for, I think, mothers I'd like to fuck.
I love that. Go moms.
The mom thing, really big. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is, I'm not sure if I will pronounce this correctly or not, but pine.
I think it might be peni, but I'm not. Please don't. I have not researched that before this category. And also, I hope that it's not a harmful term for non-Filipino people to say or use.
So I understood this as a self-referential term. Good. So a term that is used within the Filipino community for women of specifically Filipino descent. And then number 4 is lesbian. So
just a nice broad category there.
Perennial of pornography interests. And then number 5 is anal.
So, are any of those surprising to you?
I think lesbian and anal are not surprising at all. MILF is somewhat surprising because of this sort of general cultural experience of older women becoming invisible, becoming desexualized.
Yeah.
But that's not playing out in the porn interests that we're seeing, these trends in pornography use.
I was a little surprised that hentai was number 1. I don't have a reason why. I wouldn't have put it as number 1. And a couple years in a row, I've been really just like observing how many ethnic and racial categories trend. So again, not a value judgment. I'm just always interesting. Yeah.
What's going on there? Where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Yes, it says so. Pornhub actually says that hentai has the most searched for term for the last 4 years in a row.
Interesting.
So it, I guess, has become really dominant, and I don't know why. It took over from lesbian.
Oh, interesting.
So lesbian had ruled the search terms for many years before that.
Interesting.
And we'll just note, of course, that lesbian is lesbian pornography for lesbians primarily.
Is lesbian
arms
pornography
up.
for lesbians? Are you asking me? Is that rhetorical? Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of content of women loving women. I think some of it is truly women who love women for women who love women. And then some of it I think is just not. I've definitely heard the overall feeling from lesbians, and I definitely feel as a queer woman, there's a lot of garbage out there that is not targeted towards queer women.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I said I wasn't judging, so if that's what people like, as long as the performers aren't being harmed, like, have at it, like, whatever. But
Right.
there is a whole category of lesbian porn that's clearly made for a more male gaze.
For men.
Yeah. For people who don't have an interest
Pretty
in
popular.
lesbianism. So, and that's fascinating to me in other, like a whole other way that's nothing to do with porn.
So similarly with Pornhub, in the Pornhub report, we've got the top 5 categories viewed. So that's different from what people are actually typing into their computers. That's whatever categories Pornhub creates to separate out different types of content. So we see MILF coming up in here as well again.
Go MILF.
Yeah. Go older women, and anal and
Yep.
lesbian are all the same. And those are almost always in the top 5.
Yep.
And then we also see Japanese. And then the 5th top category viewed is mature. So once again, representations of older people.
My favorite thing about those categories
Mm-hmm.
is they are an affront to the whole narrative that it's mostly men watching porn and they only want
20-year-old
young.
nubile.
It's not, I want to see white men having sex with blonde-haired 22-year-olds. There's a lot outside of that is the most popular. So
Yeah.
it's super interesting to me.
Yeah, it's really reassuring in a way.
It is.
And then we also have the question about what has changed over the last year, right? So there's some perennial interests like lesbian and anal, but then what was 2024 about, right? In terms of pornography consumption. Yeah.
Maybe not fun for everyone, but
They're fascinating.
they are.
The top most trending search term for 2024,
Are we ready?
demure.
Very demure, very mindful.
Yes, indeed. And
Yeah.
related terms like mindful sex, mindful pleasure.
I really like
Yeah.
simple sex and authentic sex. Those are my favorite. Yeah, I like that. I don't know what it really means in terms of what search hits you get back, but yeah, interesting.
It's really, and then modesty is also
modesty
in
porn.
the same category. Yes.
Yeah,
Modesty porn.
craving a simpler time.
That's what 2024 is all about.
I love it. It's so fun.
It's very real.
Yeah. The second one I don't love as much.
So the second category or cluster of search terms as Pornhub identified it is around wives. And in particular, I noted trad wife and Mormon wife.
Yeah.
Now, Cari, would you like to explain to folks what trad wife means for anyone who might not be familiar with that term?
Yeah, trad wife stands for traditional wife, and I think the term has really changed over like the last decade. I think it initially was coined to mean typically like conservative Christian ideals, usually like Christian and evangelical ideals that were really focused on the submissiveness and modesty of a woman, and that what you would be searching for, basically the ideal would role for a woman is to become a wife and mother, and that a trad wife would be someone who like doesn't wear a lot of makeup, doesn't dye their hair, dresses modestly, is submissive, doesn't have tattoos, doesn't have sex with people before marriage. And then in the last couple years, it's morphed on other social media platforms to be like reappropriated by women like Nara Smith and Ballerina Farm, who are giving us what's actually luxury lifestyle content.
But
dressed
as
up
if it's simple.
Yeah, as if it's simple. So like I'm in my $1 billion ranch kitchen in Montana with my 8 children, but like I'm going to inherit $1 billion. And so it's like the reappropriation of a, quote, traditional feminine role. But in fact, these women are like the bread earners in their home. So they're really not.
The job of influencer is the job of the family, the work of the family.
Yeah, for sure.
Is creating these.
They're fantasies, like elaborate
moments.
fantasies.
Yeah.
That really I don't think can exist for anyone anywhere. And then I think the Mormon Wife one, I don't know if anybody else watched this show, but I think Mormon Wife, there was a scandal. I'm saying scandal because it's probably not scandalous for most adult people who live in the world, but it was deemed a scandal on the internet. There were a group of Mormon mom influencers that came out as participating in something called soft swinging.
Really?
Which is super fascinating. We could do a whole podcast episode. They had a Netflix show. They had a reality TV show about Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh.
And I would imagine people were interested. They're all super hot. So it makes sense that people would see them and then go search Mormon Wife. They're a very processed, sexualized.
So these are
social.
all kind of trending in social media elsewhere.
Yeah.
The demure and mindful, the trad wife, the Mormon wife. I think of Mormon wife influencer image is what I think of is the kitchen with all matching glass mason jars.
You're so right.
Yes. Super hot.
Like a lot of like open shelving too.
Yes.
That in my home would just be like cluttered with crap. Mormon wives that participate in soft swinging. Again, I'm not judging swingers. I actually don't give a hoot what anybody wants to do in their marriage. And I would like to be super clear. I didn't find the behavior of these women to be scandalous. It was just deemed a scandal by social media. I think people should do what they want and have sex with whoever they want to, right?
Clearly it's striking some kind of chord.
I guess I'm just really, like you pointed out, I think it's super interesting. PornHub isn't social media, but like it moves quickly, and I feel like the trends probably move quickly, just like other social media. And so I think we love the idea that porn is like this dark and gross part of the internet that has nothing to do with real life, but like it's clearly influenced by pop culture and trends in our culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is who we are.
Porn is who we are.
Porn is who we are. And then the third top search term was around coworkers.
I got nothing for this one.
These seem to be focused around narratives, right? Which is not really what I think of when I think of pornography. They're not narrative heavy, right?
But they often are. That's what's super fascinating. Yeah. That's a whole other podcast episode.
How sophisticated is your pornography?
I guess just to throw back to our first episode on porn, we talked about like the stereotypes of the masculine gaze wanting it to be visual and like super physical sexual acts, but then like women or quote feminine gaze wanting more scenarios. But when you unpack this, it seems like everybody wants a scenario.
Everyone wants a story. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like people are craving something like related to other stuff happening in the world.
I don't know what a pornography about Mormon wives would be without some kind of scenario.
Yeah.
To at least declare your Mormonness in some way.
Yeah, for sure. So this is my like top favorite thing of all of the research that you pulled.
So then there's also this great analysis of the top searches state by state. The most searched terms relative in each state relative to the other states, right? So it has to be a search term that is different from any other state. So we're in Illinois, and so for Illinois, the top relative search term was ASMR role play.
That is fascinating. I didn't even know that was a thing. And I definitely didn't know that you'd go to PornHub for that.
Yes.
Who knew? Illinois did, apparently. Not
Go
me.
us.
Not me. But again, it shatters this narrative that like people only want to see bodies.
Mm-hmm. There's something really specific there.
Yeah. Interesting.
That we are looking for. One other thing I want to note about the PornHub report that I found interesting, which is so PornHub also gives us statistics on who is using PornHub by gender and age. And here, what I found was that the statistics on who is visiting PornHub is differing from those independent studies that we saw.
Interesting.
So PornHub is not attracting. So for PornHub, that more traditional trajectory of tapering off around 35 or 40 years old is continuing to hold true.
Fascinating stuff.
Yes. I think as well as PornHub is attracting a much lower percentage of women than the women who are, overall number of women who are looking for porn. So PornHub has some work to do, clearly not capturing the market.
I know.
In
that seems like
those
untapped
places.
potential, given that some of the top search terms were MILF. I feel like if people knew that.
Yes.
I feel like that should be more of like their headline. Do they market? I don't know if Pornhub markets. They probably don't need to.
We're giving them free marketing right now.
We really are.
Yeah.
We really are.
They've got this great report, and that has interesting information in it.
For sure.
Yeah. So what it raises for me is, where are women going for their pornography? And
I would just love to sink into how that would compare trending with the market for audio and text erotica. Like, I would just be so interested to see. Does that bear out that women do truly want other forms of pornography, or are women over 40 not consuming as much porn as women under 40?
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing all of that data. I guess if I could summarize it in one sentence, I would say the data is imperfect, but a lot of people watch porn. Probably the majority of people in the United States watch porn or have watched porn at some point. And I think that's really interesting, considering some of the extreme social messaging around pornography and how taboo it still is. And I think that tension is really interesting and is where we should leave it for the episode. And hopefully we can dive into kind of more of the ways that tension shows up in a future episode. What do you think, Nina?
I like that. And also those ways in which pornography is deeply connected to other parts of our social media lives. It's not some separate thing that stands apart from the rest of our lives. We are just living our lives in all kinds of ways, including in our use of pornography.
I love it. More to come. Right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for spending time with us today. Don't forget, we would like to hear from you. What do you think of today's episode? What questions or thoughts do you have about sex and sexuality? We will share some questions and replies in a future episode. Write to us at gaspod@gmail.com. That's GASPPOD@gmail.com.
GASP is a joint venture between Dancing Elm Consulting and Cari Hypes.
That's right. And also thank you to Motion Post Inc. for editing, and to the Oak Park Public Library for providing the audio booth.
Thanks also to our sponsor, Oak Park Our Whole Lives. Oak Park Owl delivers comprehensive, inclusive sexuality education to youth and families in the Greater West Side of the Chicagoland area. For more information, check out their website at www.opowl.org.
Take care of yourself and others. Talk to you soon.